Greetings, September 25th, 2016. As I mentioned in the video I just did, in which I read the text of this short one-column article published in Contrast Magazine and Arts Magazine Quarterly from Kansas City, Missouri of the early 1980s, which had reproductions of my etching of Martin Buber and of Eliezer Ben Yehuda and Ahad A'am, early Zionists. And I have this proof temporarily, I don't know it, of my 1981 etching Martin Buber, which was also reproduced in a review, the first review of my work in a Seattle newspaper, in the Seattle Weekly on March 11th, 1981. I'm going to read the text of Sue Ann Kendall's article about that exhibit at which the Buber etching was among the works displayed. And this Buber etching proof helping a family friend and a relative of a now elderly couple who expressed the wish to have works of mine they had bought back in 1982 donated. I'm helping them fulfill that quest. This will be going into a public collection, which I'll announce shortly. So on to Sue Ann Kendall's article. It was in the visual arts section of the weekly, and it was titled From Marc Chagall to Ben Shahn and Back. Getting a lot of light reflection here. I think I'll hold this over here while I read Miss Kendall's article. A hybrid mythological creature with the head of a man and the body of a bird sits perched on a locomotive chariot that soars high above Manhattan, a Manhattan of tiny, distant, fragile skyscrapers. It is the image of a huge, skyward-bound soul, more real than the earthbound glut of human bustle that is transcended. The myth is a personal one. It is the convincing unreality of a dream. Its creature is Ken Segan. Well, they have here Ken Akiva Segan, a printmaker whose images range from lyrical fantasy to intense Judaic humanitarianism. Born in New York, art-schooled in the Midwest, and now career-bound in Seattle, Seattle is having its first Seattle showing. Segan is having his first Seattle showing at the temple to Hirsch, Sinai. Pardon me. Segan's lyricism is abundant in his copious dream images. Mutations of fish and man and of skeletons and scales break apart, multiply, overlap, and rearrange themselves. And in parentheses, the birth of an ichthyologist, number 2. In his architectural fantasies, stacked geometric assemblages grow and spread until they fill the entire width of the plate. But it is in the images Segan devotes to Judaic themes that we see his other side, the socio-political humanitarian one. There is a penetrating portrait etching of Martin Buber, a double portrait of two early 20th century Zionists. That is the one reproduced here in the Kansas City Magazine. And a tribute to Marc Chagall. In J'accuse, the skeleton of a Jew whose chest is a six-pointed star branded Juif emerges from amidst a holocaust of multicolored streaks and squiggles. Large hollow eye sockets stare relentlessly at the viewer, the accused. Subjects in Segan's art vacillate between social constraints or ills and release from them. Sometimes it's the law who, quote, is the eyes that are handcuffs that are always watching you, exclamation, end of quote. But it's just as likely to be the soaring birdman who escapes it all. In Dream, O dream of sailing ships and shining seas, yes, indeed, we see both. A man's body recoils inward, its constraint relieved only by the image of a sailing ship that grows out of his imagination. Segan's work belongs to that strain of modernism called expressionism. At times it is overzealous, even overstated, but its kind of art often derives its effect from just such overkill, as in the portrait of Chagall, whose character emerges from a charged facial landscape of fanciful dark patterns. Elsewhere, the forcefulness of Segan's forms is more simple and direct. Hard linear errors are played off against stark backgrounds, parentheses, self-portrait, or delicately structured forms are set against soft puddles of carefully chosen tones. In Genesis 1, for example, a crawling, spindly, flower-like burst of light opposes its own dark, soft shadow, separating the light from the dark, the day from the night. It is difficult to know what direction Segan's art will take. His artistic roots lie in German expressionist woodcuts and the social realism of Americans like Ben Shahn. Yet the spirit of Chagall is very much alive in his images of personal fantasy. That he digs in both wells is not surprising. Expressionism and fantasy both traffic in the unbounded energies of raw emotion. That's it. Terrific review. I'm actually delighted to reread that. I'm going to mention a couple of things. She mentioned a number of artworks which I've posted videos of proofs of several of the etchings she mentioned. There's at least one YouTube video up about the Eliezer Ben Yehuda and Ahad A'am early Zionist etching. There's at least one video up of the sole proof I still own of the homage à Marc Chagall, homage to Marc Chagall. I believe I have a proof up of the mixed media work called J'accuse, which I have here in the studio. As well as there is at least one or more videos of proofs I own of The Law is the Eyes. And there's at least one or two videos up of the completed proof as well as an early state when it was a line etch of the etching in aquatint called Dream, O Dream of Sailing Ships and Shining Seas. There's probably, I'm not sure which self-portrait it was that was exhibited. I have to look at the exhibit photos I have from the Hirsch Sinai show. But I believe it's a black and white etching, and there are proofs, videos of that up as well. And there's at least one video up of a proof of the Genesis 1 etching that Ms. Kendall wrote about that I videoed at the home of relatives out in the East Coast. And I also have the proof that had belonged to the now older couple, and that's going to be going to the, as part of their request that their works of mine that they own be donated. That is going to be going to the Alaska Jewish History Museum and Cultural Center, and I will video that before I pack it and ship it off, as I have it here temporarily. There you have it. Marc Chagall to Ben Chagall. Marc Chagall. From Marc Chagall to Ben Shahn and back by Sue Ann Kendall. Thank you, Sue Ann Kendall. Excellent review.